I'm worried about Arknights Endfield. It's almost been 6 months since the last global closed beta, and we still don't have a release date. I'm seeing major gacha titles like musume and Persona 5X release, and I'm wondering when it will be Enfield's turn. What's keeping hypergryph from releasing it? After speaking with members of the community, I came to the conclusion that there are internal and external factors that are causing Endfield to be delayed. Let me explain. As I mentioned in the intro, there has been a lot of gacha games coming out, and even more announced for the future, like NTE, Anata, Rewinding Cadence, and many more. And the thing is, there's only a limited amount of people who are willing to put up with a gacha monetization system in their games. The audience is usually much more limited compared to mainstream games. The more gacha games come out trying to appeal for the general gacha audience, the more the audience is going to get divided between those games. With such a variety of options, a lot of people already have gachas that they're invested in. This is both in terms of time, getting invested in the community, and of course, money. People with high investment in their gachas have a stronger resistance to leaving the current gacha game. If you spend $100, $200, $300 on a gacha game, then that sunk cost fallacy is gonna hit. It'll be much harder for you to switch to a new gacha game if that game doesn't offer much of an improvement, or tickles an itch that your current gacha game doesn't. These are live service games, and people get invested in the community, art, the memes, and make friends over their shared love of the game. This only makes it riskier and riskier to release a gacha. As time passes, more gacha games come out, and the potential audience you can have as a gacha developer becomes smaller and smaller. You have to keep in mind that these gacha games are definitely not cheap to develop, make, and market. If you make a big gacha and it does not meet expectations, it could spell ruin for most gacha studios. Except for Hoyoverse, of course. Gacha games nowadays can't afford to fail, the costs are too high, and the chances of success have only been decreasing ever since Genshin broke into the mainstream 5 years ago. There is another issue as well. Whenever a new gacha comes out, players that feel bored with their current gacha or aren't too invested will leave to try the new shiny toy. The feeling of starting a new gacha and getting all the rewards on release is a high that a lot of people chase. So even if you release your gacha and you have a period of downtime during your, let's say, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 for example, then you risk a large portion of your audience leaving before you have the chance to fix things. There are always ways to mitigate this, of course, but a lot of gacha games are suffering from homogenization, and that's the new risk all gacha games have to face. If you haven't been following the news cycle in regards to gacha games, then you might have missed it, but most new gacha games feel very similar. And that's especially the case when it comes to open world gachas. It feels like rather than making something new, a lot of the studios have decided to make Genshin or Wu again basically, with just minor changes. Of course, I'm talking about both visually and in terms of the mechanics as well. As a result, there will be a huge overlap in audience for these games, and they will inevitably cannibalize each other as each of the games come out. That's what happens when you go for a general audience and you don't give your players much to latch onto. People will move quickly into the next game that might be marginally better, and there will not be enough time between each release for players to get attached to begin with. And it's not like it's the developer's fault either. I've seen a lot of players in the beta of these gachas complain and ask the game devs to remove core features that make the game unique. Every gacha game that they play has to be like Genshin and Wu or their favorite gacha that they're playing right now. For example, I've spoken to a few friends who are somewhat interested in Endfield, and what I often hear from them is that, oh, I want to get into the game, I'm looking forward for the new release. Although I'm not a big fan of the factory building, the zip lines, the gear system, I wish they had a stronger dodge, a parry. Actually, I'm not a fan of the setting, they should make it separate from Arknights. At that point, you clearly don't like the game to begin with. If you just like what the game has to offer and the core identity and functions, then you don't have to play it. You could just watch someone else do a playthrough or watch the characters through fan art or something. Again, I saw the exact same complaints when HSR released, but to a more absurd degree. People were demanding Hoyo mix HSR into an action RPG and complaining about that constantly into 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 and so on. Clearly, if you don't like the core aspect of the game, which is the turn-based combat, then the game's not for you. Gacha games want everything to be Genshin Impact, or now recently Wuthering Waves as well. They're going into gacha games that they're clearly not the target audience of and demanding the game completely changes its direction, core identity, and gameplay loops just to fit them. Just go play Genshin at that point, or you know, any normal game. Stop asking for the Genshification of every gacha game that comes out. Going back to the dev side, they have to be very receptive to criticism during the beta and the early life of the gacha game, so they can make sure they don't kill off their player base. As I mentioned towards the start of the video, gacha games are a very risky endeavor nowadays, and some studios will just opt in for the safe option so they get something that works basically. However, they have to be able to filter out the criticism from people who are asking for the game to change completely away from its intended genre, category, and niche. Any random bozo can sign up to a closed beta test just because they saw something shiny from the marketing. Not all of the beta testers are people who would have actually played the game once it came out and stick with it. Unfortunately, a lot of gacha devs don't end up on this path. If the game does not have a clear identity, or if its core mechanics and gameplay loops aren't refined, then you end up with a mess that pleases both the intended audience and the more general audience that would get attached to the game. You know, if the devs are lost, so will be the players. This brings me to talk about an example from my current gacha game, the one I've been playing since release, Zenless Zone Zero. Zenless is an interesting case study. It was the first gacha I decided to make videos about because, back then, the discourse surrounding the game and the general state of it on release made me want to speak up about it and give my 2 cents. If you weren't present for ZZZ 1.0 to 1.4, then let me fill you in using my own experience with the game. On release, we had the TV mode as a core part of ZZZ. It was just a board that you can move around using a little bamboo icon. It was very well integrated in the story and the aesthetics of the game, and a lot of the side quests, and the entire main story was told through the TV mode. The main issue that made the TV mode so infamous was how disliked it was by most of the player base. While a lot of people did like it, me being one of them, they complained about how frequently we had to go through it. I thought about it for a while and came to a conclusion that there were 2 reasons why the TV mode failed. Number 1, for such a core game mechanic, it felt very underwhelming. It was like I was playing a minigame rather than interacting with the main storytelling tool of the game, especially when you compare it to the very intricate and detailed combat system. You may think they added it as an afterthought, or to save time. Some story segments did fare better than others, with unique gimmicks or well thought out stages, Chapter 1 train sequence being a good example, but on the other hand, most stages just felt clunky or repetitive. Which brings you to my second point, it was shoved down your throat everywhere. Main quests, side quests, or even major events. This would have been an issue if it was implemented properly and not a half-baked afterthought a majority of the time, which, if you recall the previous point, clearly was not the case. It was not intriguing on its own to warrant its frequency, and needed the devs to invest a lot of time and effort into making the TV mode stages interesting. Afterwards, they would still need to place them strategically and weave them properly into the storytelling, and I honestly think we could have had the TV mode today if more thought was given to that mechanic. Maybe you could have combined the TV mode, the fighting segments, and the larger 3D stages to give a more complete product, but that bridge has been burnt. Most of the current player base hate the TV mode now, and would dislike it being added back. The door has been closed for ZZZ to experiment with a mechanic like that, something that should have been completed and refined in CBT2, CBT3. If this was a smaller gacha dev, and not MiHoYo with money to burn, then I doubt ZZZ would have been able to bounce back. Enough talk about ZZZ. What's the solution? How can we prevent new gacha games from losing their identity and homogenizing and becoming the same game? I think the answer lies in their perspective. If you recall, at the start of the video, I spoke about how the gacha audience is limited. However, I don't believe that will stay for that way forever. While a lot of people heavily dislike gacha monetization, if a gacha game is unique enough and intriguing enough, then people are willing to put aside their hatred and play it. You saw it with musume. It broke through the gacha sphere, and I see a lot of people in the mainstream, including big Twitch streamers, play it. Rather than trying to go for the same share of the pie in terms of audience, studios working on new gacha games should be aiming beyond that, beyond the small gacha sphere that we have here. Go for a niche. If you're uninspired, have a look at different genres of video games that we have and yoink and twist. Take the game design aspects, add your lore, aesthetic, storytelling, and make it into a gacha game. Azure Premilia and Arknights Endfield are a good example of that. For a brief look, it looks like Azure Premilia has taken inspiration from Palworld or even Pokemon in some aspects of the game. And Endfield, of course, looks like it has inspiration from Death Stranding, Xenoblade Chronicles, Factorio, and Satisfactory. And of course, most importantly, Arknights. Even then, there's so much opportunity and potential in this genre for innovation. I personally think every gamer who is hesitant to play gachas has one gacha game that they would play if it existed. Okay, it sounds a bit sinister, like I'm trying to get everyone addicted to gambling, but the point still stands. There's an untapped market, man. Another point for the devs, If you want accurate feedback, try giving the beta to people who would fall into your target audience. A really nice way to do that would be working with content creators that play games in your gacha's genre. You can give them beta keys that they can give away to the audience who would probably be more likely to be in your target audience, compared to a random Andy signing up for every gacha game beta they come across. Having feedback from a general audience is nice, but you really need feedback from people who like the game and want to improve it, so you can refine and polish the core of what you have. This is in contrast to some people who want to change the game to something completely else, because every gacha has to serve their tastes. Talking about that, you don't have to like every gacha. If you hate RTS games, and a gacha game has a lot of RTS elements, then the game's probably not for you. If you hate turn-based games and a gacha game is turn-based, then the game's probably not for you. If you hate ARPG games and a gacha game has ARPG elements, then the game's not for you. Of course, this does not mean you cannot criticize a gacha game unless you play a so-and-so game, but you have to keep that context in mind when you're coming up with your criticism. That's it. Now you can see why I'm worried about Arknights Endfield. While I'm really excited to play the game, there's just too many pitfalls in regards to launching a gacha game in 2025. Best case scenario, hypergryph figure outs what it wants to do with optimizing the factory building and the combat aspect of the game. I don't mind them taking their time for that. I'd rather have a solid launch later on in the year than a disastrous one now. Please check out the poll in the community post section and on the channel. I'm interested to see how many people here have come from playing Arknights. If you enjoyed the video and what I had to say, make sure to like and sub. If you disagree with anything, then please let me know in the comments or join the Discord to have a discussion. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.